So it's having an effect, the technology is having an effect on the sort of spaces that we create for our students. And that's happening in all sorts of interesting ways. You might like to try and guess what is these photographs of all of one building. Does anyone want to shout out what they think the building is? You might be able to guess. Somebody got it right. Was that you, Ross? Somebody yelled out library, I think, and they're correct. But it's not, of course, it's not a traditional looking library. And of course, those of you who've had the privilege here to see the classroom of the future, it's affecting the design of our institutions, both schools and universities. There's a lot of interest in learning spaces in Australia at the moment. Monash itself is involved with building a new science school. You can't see all the details, but this is one of the flaws of the design of the new school, and it doesn't look like a typical school. Neither does the next floor. There's all sorts of open boundaries, some vague feeling about groups, grouping and theatres and so on, but it's a very different look, and partly that is arising because of the technology. But I would like to note that historically, really, it's been the kindergartens and the primary schools who've taken the lead in learning spaces. I mean, it's decades since they first started to develop more open plan arrangements, working subgroups of students and so on. And they were driven by pedagogy, not technology. And it's taken these decades, and now with the extra impetus of the technology, that's moving our tertiary institutions along. Okay. Can I now just widen up, say, okay, there's all this stuff, what do we do about it? What do you do in your institution? How do you align all your forces? How do you get everyone working in the same direction? How do you help your champions and so on? That's the situation that we've faced at Monash, and we've reacted to it we're working on what we call an educational technology framework. So it's not exactly a review or a plan, it's something wider. And that is fundamentally what we think a framework is. It's a project that relates to very complex problems, cross-portfolio problems, need to bring together things that are happening now, advance new activities and so on. We also have other frameworks going on, such as the Student Experience Framework. And I would add that all this work is supported by, and I won't go to the Educational Technology Committee, the important thing is that that committee has representation from right across the university, including the students. The students are represented on our Educational Technology Committee and take it very seriously. So that's the aims of our framework, and they're the sorts of things that you would expect in any framework. Now, as you know, actually the second rule of learning PowerPoint, the first rule is, of course, to know how to turn your slide off, which is pressing the B button or this special one here. The second rule is to make sure everything's readable, and so I've broken that rule pretty stunningly on this slide, but it is actually a conceptual map of what our educational technology framework looks like. And I put that up because what I'm going to do now is look at the major bits. I mean, that actually says Educational Technology Framework. We'll forget the executive summary, but we'll have a quick look at purpose and scope, influences, and the implications. So on the next slide is the purpose and scope of the framework, which will include the definitions and so on. And I'll just put these up here for you to read as time is marching on quite quickly. Then we need to look at the influences, and some of these are contextual. You know, what's distinctive about Monash? It's big. It has a very strong internationalisation push. We have 6 campuses in Australia. We have a campus in Malaysia, one in South Africa. We've got a centre in Prato, Italy. We've got a centre in London. We have a lot of international students. We're research intensive, as I say, with the multiple campuses. We have certain institutional directions that are being followed. Also, we need to look at what are the trends in educational technology, both external to our university. GO8 there, some people might be able to read, means the group of 8. Just like in the UK, you have the Russell Group and so on. Australia likes to think it's got 8 good universities, and Monash is one of the group of 8. But what's going on externally in the group of 8 and globally, and what is going on internally. But as well, of course, we have to look at what does the research tell us, and not the very finely tuned research, but what is the big picture? What are the big issues that have emerged out of research in educational technology over the last few decades? And there are things like contextualisation. There are things like authentic assessment and feedback. Feedback, very important issue. What other things? Students want flexibility, they want convenience. So that's our framework, that's how it's going along. What are the implications? We've divided these up into 3 areas, in policy, practice and governance. If you go to the Monash website and have a look at the policy on educational technology, I'd be quite embarrassed. I'd rather you didn't actually. It's about 7 years old and it's pretty useless. So we've got a fair bit of work to do there. So we need to develop some new policy. There's an example of the sorts of thing that we're doing. We need to look at practice. I know yesterday Bob Fox in his presentation was talking about how you support staff. How do you support staff development? And their emerging ideas. I quite like the phrase, at elbow support, for the staff member who's sitting there trying to learn how to use the technology. And in terms of governance, that we need to know how educational technology works within the university. So there's a lot to do, and you'll notice in the top right that we're starting to talk about an innovation centre, and I know my colleagues at the OUHK are pretty excited about that, as they're ahead of us on that one. They have their innovation centre and they've got a nice little present from the government to get it moving, so congratulations. Just one other key point I wanted to pick up on was the very tricky business of how do you mainstream a sort of a minor technology? How do you move that forward? We haven't quite got all the answers yet, but we're starting to develop an innovation support model that runs right from sort of, at this end, the independently provided, where some individual or small group is working away on it, and that might be something like the current Second Life interest group. Then you have innovation hotbeds through to a full pilot, some kind of controlled deployment to see how it goes, right through to essentially managed and provided service, and of course at that end we have something like our portal and Muso and so on. But that's the sort of model that we're working on. We haven't got all the details worked out yet, it's tricky, but we hope to get there. So that's our framework. Our vision is to align all these forces. So many good things happening, let's make sure we're all rowing in the same direction, and we think Monash will improve by doing that. It's not the content, it's not the software, it's the value that we add as teachers to the educational experience. And I think that's the fundamental, underlying issue for us.